Good evening once again, folks, and this is Robert Vaughn and Alex Jewell with the DeFi Collective at Let's Talk Radio. Today, we have another very interesting subject that we're going to cover regarding, decentralized finance. We're going to look at the political implications of wealth transfer and how DeFi might help reverse this. Also, we're going to talk a little bit about how DeFi can contribute to market freedom. Market freedom is so important because along with market freedom, it sort of precipitates leads to other types of freedoms, to political freedom, when you have market freedom. And so we're gonna talk about that first. We're also going to talk about worker co-ops and decentralized autonomous organizations, DAOs, whether they can work together or they have anything in common or that sort of thing. So without further ado, I'm going to flip to Alex. Alex, let's get going, man. Tell me about market freedom, how market freedom can help, how DeFi can contribute to market freedom and reverse ownership is what we are trying to do. So you got it. Take it away.
Yeah. Well, market freedom it's something that is actually at the core of a lot of political ideologies. You know, what a lot of people truly believe in, more than, a lot of even social issues. What they truly believe in is this idea of a free market. You had the French with laissez-faire, and you've seen how that's still around in terms of how a lot of, European countries in particular think about economics. Even the more progressive European countries, certain Nordic countries, Switzerland and Sweden, these countries still employ very much a laissez-faire model for their markets. But the problem that we've seen, of course, is that with free market that takes over governance, when you have a conflict of interest in terms of where your governance comes from, in terms of where your legislation comes from, in terms of who the legislation is for, if there's any ounce of corruption there that snowballs to the point where your quality of life as a human being is not ensured by government, then you're not really protected against what free market is. And essentially what free market is this premise at some point that profit ends up being more important than human life or human quality of life. So this battle has always raged in history of where do we draw the line between free market and what are the things that people deserve, right? What are the things that people are entitled to in a society that government can ensure on behalf of them, especially in a democratic society? And what are the things that people should have freedom to if they want to? The luxuries, the free market, if they want to start a business and try to make money that way. How do we ensure both of those sides of the coin? Obviously, countries like America have struggled in striking that right balance, right? Especially if you look at our healthcare side. So if you think about what decentralization offers us that inherent ownership by the public, that reversal of ownership that we talk about all the time, a worker-run economy where all of us who participate own the free market, and you have governance baked in, true democratization of that, where of course it's in our own favor because we decide the rules. If you have that and you have the free market that we all enjoy, the ability to start a business when you want to, make money when you want to, and have all of that freedom, especially in a digital economy, to be your own boss, to have full access and equity without gatekeeping to the economy. Decentralization gives you both of those, right? Now, is it traditional libertarianism? No, but of course, lots of libertarians love blockchain technology. A lot of it was invented by libertarians, right? But I think it's inherently progressive also because of that reversal of ownership, because it sort of returns the means of production to the workers in a sense.
Okay, well, this brings something to mind. Market freedom, laissez-faire capitalism was supposed to be completely hands off from the government.
Right.
And we found out that It seems like the more the government gets involved, the less market freedom you have, and the less laissez-faire capitalism you have. So I think, in a lot of ways, capitalism has a bad rap because of government involvement.
Yep.
Yeah. It's like the commercial where the three guys in suits knock on a lady's door and they say, "Hey, we're from the government. We're here to help you." And she takes off running out the back door. I think, that if there were true market freedom, I think it would be much more equitable, but it's not. The government has gotten involved. And I think one of the reasons the government's gotten involved is because humans, I don't want to say are inherently dishonest, but sometimes you have to keep them honest.
Right.
Like for instance, using a blockchain, having a ledger, a verifiable, and transparent ledger of transactions,
Yep.
I think would go a long way towards helping keep people honest.
Right.
And I see, DeFi, impacting market freedom in the sense that if there's some way you can sort of get the benefits both of capitalism, and blockchain decentralized finance, and maybe there's some good things that you could sort of combine and have sort of a hybrid capitalism.
Right.
Because all these economic systems don't go away overnight, but they just sort of gradually fade away. And I think capitalism is kind of like on life support now.
Yeah.
The government's having to come in every 3 or 4 years and bail it out by printing money, which makes the money that's in circulation worth a lot less. So I think anything that we can do, to ensure freer markets and a fair market.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the big things is, the market should be fair. The reversal of ownership has to be there, and I think once you decentralize, the economic power basis, so to speak, you'll have much more market freedom, because it's just like companies. They're started by these idealistic entrepreneurs. They grow real big, and then they reach a point where they stop doing research and inventing new technology, and they hire lobbyists.
Right.
And
Exactly.
that's sort of when the market freedom starts to fade, because then the game is rigged against the next entrepreneur that maybe has a great idea, and you get a situation like Facebook. They say, "Oh, well, hell, let's just buy WhatsApp. We're just buying. We can get their technology, and of course it's nobody. WhatsApp is supposed to be a platform that's totally not messed with, or people don't look at, but they found out 2 weeks ago that Facebook actually it's supposed to be encrypted, but Facebook has been looking at WhatsApp.
Right.
So now, WhatsApp is not a platform that's not, that's even though it is encrypted, Facebook is still looking at it, which they're not supposed to do.
Right.
Then also they bought Instagram because Instagram, was making a move. And so I think things like that sort of are the antithesis of market freedom, and it's market control. And, I think decentralized finance could go a long way towards ensuring some market freedom. For instance, if there were a social media platform that existed on the blockchain,
Right.
that didn't have to depend upon surveillance capitalism and advertising for revenue.
Yeah.
Maybe maybe it's constructed in the pattern of being maybe a DAO.
Or if there is advertising, it's advertising that the consumer benefits from, right? It's advertising where you get paid because there's profit to advertising. So if there's full transparency on what the advertisers are using, how they're using it, and you're making money because you've been advertised to, well, that's a fairer system, right? And I think this is, this is the inherent problem of a completely free market. The inherent problem of a completely free market is that when you play it out, right, when you play out the trajectory without any checks at all, well, now you have the Amazons and the Facebooks, and you have these companies that have grown, whether it's first mover advantage, whether it's acquisition models, right? Whatever these models are that have either been very intentional or even accidental, that creates these these monoliths that end up actually creating a not so free market.
Right, exactly.
But not only that, end up creating a lot of problems for people, who are consumers. Well, now we have a very big problem of like, well, we said government should interfere at all, but like now we have some things we have to protect people from, right? What if there's no government protections to protect the environment from plastic spilling into the river next to a factory? Right. What if there aren't any government protections to protect us from fraud? To say this company's committed fraud 40 times and they're going to keep doing it. And what do we do about that, right? Do we just say, well, it's a free market, so the government can't do anything? And you just let every grandmother, pick up the phone when the scam happens? Or, there's so many instances where we have to protect something, especially in terms of when we end up with monopolies. Because you look at a company like Amazon, and Amazon's business model isn't selling products. Amazon's business model is way bigger than that. It started as a bookstore, but now it's morphed into, well, Amazon's controlling its own distribution. They're flying their products around. They're not having to pay other companies. They're just sort of they're owning everything A to Z for themselves. And so there's not even a possibility for competition. How could you compete with that? If I'm starting out and I'm going to run my own online store, and I don't have my own airplanes, and I don't have my own logistics, and I don't have I'm not even hosting my own services on my own servers, right? Amazon owns AWS, they own logistics companies, they own robotics companies and automation companies, they own whole fleets of airplanes and vehicles.
They own the cloud.
Right. They own the cloud. They own everything from A to Z for themselves. Mm-hmm. I mean, how many vendors is Amazon using? Right. And so you look at a company like that and you say, well, okay, in a completely free market, nobody would be here to stop them. Mm-hmm. Nobody would be here to ask them questions. Right. And in our corrupt, democratic system, also nobody's there because they're also influencing the governance that should be regulating them, right? Mm-hmm. And so regulation is important, but when you have a corruption of the government that creates a regulation, free market is even worse because it ends up being over-regulated, or it ends up being regulated to the favor of the corporations by government interference. Okay. Government interference should always be on behalf of the consumer, but that's never the case anymore. And so that's why with decentralization, not only can we avoid these centralized monoliths that end up with the monopolies and with black box algorithms and with all these things that make them tons more money on our backs, but we end up with a system where the governance that protects us from any wide range of evils that the free market can produce, it inherently protects us in a really transparent way where we decide the rules and we have organizations, these co-ops, DAOs of decentralized people who really care about creating a better system. You end up with all of that solves all the problems. It creates the free market, but it also creates the governance that's needed, and it prevents the free market from playing out into centralized entities that nobody can compete with anyway.
Right. And I think one of the I see as one of the biggest problems that sort of prevents us in this country from moving forward on a lot of different fronts are, if you got enough money and enough lobbyists, you can co-opt any senator or any congressperson you want. And you don't have to co-opt a lot. You can just get to one guy, one or two people, depending upon, the mix of the Senate and the Congress. And you can pretty much stop any legislation, or you can put any legislation through that you want.
Throw some riders on for a certain price.
Oh, yeah. And I think, I was reading an interesting article about Joe Manchin about how deep his family is in the coal business. I mean, they are up to their necks in the coal business. That's how they make their money. So it only stands to reason that he wouldn't want clean air.
Yep.
He wouldn't want clean air in terms of his pocket. Now he may want clean air for his grandkids, but he hasn't shown that yet. And I think that's just one example. I think there's a lot of examples that capitalism has kind of gone off the rails because it's no longer for the people. And even the people that get elected and say we're for the people, they say, well, I'm for the people, but I'm not going to touch, Jamie Dimon in New York, or I'm not going to screw around with so-and-so. I'm not going to say anything bad about Warren Buffett. He's a good guy, And so I think it's for the people, but to a point. And, it's almost, to me, it's almost ridiculous, because you have two different parties and people say, well, the Republicans, this and the Democrat, and they all get funded by the same people.
Right.
And they all do pretty much the same thing. There may be some differences on social issues and some things like that, but they, if you use people say, well, he's a centrist Republican or he's a centrist Democrat, they're the same guy.
Right.
And I think that's kind of, what's been standing in the way. I hate to harp on climate change, but let's get to the point now that anybody that can, I've got neighbors that don't believe in climate change. It's not, it's not so much whether or not you believe in it. It's like whether or not you believe in facts,
Right.
I guess
let's say climate change isn't something we've invented. It's still happening. Right.
Right.
Even if it's part of the normal cycle, we should do something about what's occurring.
And we shouldn't sacrifice the globe so certain people can make more money. It's ridiculous. You would be so greedy that you would try to make money while destroying the earth.
Yeah.
And it's mostly older people, because younger people look at it a lot differently. You talk to somebody in high school or college, and they're like, hey, we want this planet to be around for us.
Well, imagine you have a finite resource like fossil fuel, right? That is dirty. It's fundamentally dirty, whether you think it's affecting the planet or not. And so you have a finite resource that is not efficient. And then you have renewable energy, which by design, by its name, is renewable. It's an endless resource of energy. So you have sunlight and wind power and water power, right? You have all these things that are not wasteful. They don't create emissions. They are renewable sources. And if you can choose between those two things, why would you choose the one that doesn't make sense? Even if you don't believe in climate change, if you have more efficient, better designed systems and sources of energy, and the only reason is because of greed, right? The only reason is because they like their existing businesses and don't want to have to pivot. And I think that's fundamentally a problem, whether they believe in climate change or not.
And, on this show, we like to deal with facts. Most of the wars in the last 100 years have been about petroleum.
Yep.
People say, well, their land, we want to free these people. No, you want their oil, and, Second World War, the Marshall Plan. Well, Iran's got a lot of oil. Why don't we just carve off a little chunk? We'll call it Kuwait. And they promised to keep their money in the British banks. And we'll let British Petroleum run it for a while. And, if you do that, then we'll let you, take some of the diamond mines down here. But petroleum has sort of driven a lot of policy, over the past 100 years. Rockefeller, John D. Rockefeller, one time in the early 1900s, and this just blew my mind when I read this stat. He controlled 98% of the oil business. 98% of the oil business. I'm talking about drilling, refining. I can remember as a kid, and my dad had a Ohio credit card. And I remember looking on the back, and he said, well, you can use this at, like 30 different companies, 30 different stations. And that's because Rockefeller controlled he owned all those stations, with Exxon, Gulf. He used to own 98%. He controlled. And that was at that time, that's when Cleveland, Ohio was the wealthiest city in the world, because he controlled 98% of the oil business.
Yeah. Right.
Now,
well, you had the Rockefellers there, you had the Squires there. You had these huge families,
Hannah Mining, you had,
yeah,
the so-called industrialists. Yeah.
Right.
And it was really mind-blowing to know that one person could control that much. And then, you fast forward 10 or 20 years, they broke it up with the, monopoly, antitrust legislation
during the progressive era, right?
Yeah, which was mostly pioneered here at Jones Day Law Firm, by Bob Rawson was one of the, Bob Rawson Sr. was one of the leaders in the antitrust breakup of a lot of these companies. And, it sort of went away, and now it's sort of like coalesced again.
Yep.
That's why they're talking about maybe Facebook has gotten too big.
Right.
See, Facebook has something that Rockefeller didn't have. And that's as they have surveillance capitalism, they have data analytics.
Direct influence on every single person. Right. Yeah.
Direct influence on everybody, and not just in this country, around the world. Facebook was going to give India free internet. They would give Facebook access. They said, you know what? We'll take a pass on that, Zuckerberg. We'll take a pass on that.
Like, wait a second. What do you want?
Yeah. He wanted the data, man, on
right. It wasn't just the kindness of his heart to give free internet, right, to the developing world. And that's what's interesting about our wars, not just our wars, but where our foreign interests lie. Why we were in the Middle East instead of Africa pre-1980s, because we didn't know how much oil was in Africa yet. So after the 1980s, the moment they started noticing that, 30% or something of the world's oil reserves were in Africa.
We love Nigeria. We love Venezuela.
Yeah. Everybody decided they wanted to be in Africa also, right? Yeah, and so you've got India, South China, America, the US. Everybody cares about Africa now because, a huge percentage of oil is still there, and we already messed up the Middle East. So, I mean, it's.
Yeah. And I think, eventually, hopefully, I think electric cars, require a lot of lithium, and I guess lithium mining is a pretty dirty business also.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there are other, forms of energy. I'm sure that, there was a lot of work done with hydrogen engines for a while.
Yeah, hydrogens.
Using electricity to break down the hydrogen, oxygen, using oxygen to run the car.
It could be highly unstable, but if they can figure it out, if they can crack it, hydrogen will be. But hydrogen is still.
Well, petroleum is pretty flammable.
Yeah, lithium, of course, is a major issue, and
it is.
It's especially because you look at who owns a lot of lithium. Where is Elon? What makes Elon Musk and Tesla so valuable is not necessarily cars, and it's not even necessarily the produced batteries. He has a monopoly already on a bunch of lithium mines around the world. He has exclusive rights to some 60% of lithium sources in the world. And so what people are investing in when they invest in Tesla right now is not necessarily cars. They're investing in the fact that when we run out of lithium, there's one guy that's got access to a lot of lithium on the planet, right? And this is a scarcity problem that starts making companies and humans beings even more powerful than they already are. So
I think that may change though, because, you remember with the oil companies, after a while, the Arabs, they were tired of getting ripped off, for the oil, so they said, we're gonna nationalize.
Right.
And I think you're probably going to see lithium going the same way. They're going to nationalize a lot of lithium mines.
Yeah.
I think as soon as they have the technology to produce batteries.
Yeah.
But and I think, China loves Africa now. They never used to even know where Africa was. They never knew where Africa was on a map, and they love Africa now. They even just bought a port. They got a port on the
Yep.
east coast of Africa now.
They're all fighting over the islands too. All
Yeah,
these
yeah.
strategically placed islands
Right,
around the continent of Africa.
right.
All these countries are buying up those islands, and there's people that live on these islands, and
Yeah.
they're suddenly waking up one day and there's like they're building a base on the other side of their island, and they're like, what are you guys doing? India keeps getting in trouble for this because in the Gulf of where India is with Africa and then the whole rest of the continent over here, there's islands that India is putting naval bases on strategically, and there's people that live on these islands who are like, wait a second, and they're just telling them, oh, we're just making a hotel, we're like building these beautiful things for you. They're like, that's not a hotel, that's a runway that you're building.
Yeah.
And so of course these countries are, even though a lot of their future their plans are digital, of course, in terms of how to run the world in the future, they still are there's still a lot of imperialism happening in terms of like, this game of war that's happening. You see it happening with Vietnam and Thailand and some of these South Asian places now. You see like China fighting over Taiwan, and you see like really interesting tensions in these very strategic parts of the planet in the water. But it's, when you look at like renewable energy, it's a lot of it still coming down to the fact that even renewable energy has these vital sources of finite resources that go into it. And until we go to things like liquid batteries or nuclear, or even hydrogen, things that are way more renewable at the source, then we're still going to see this imperialistic battle over natural resources.
Right. I think, decentralized finance is going to change all economic systems, change political systems.
Right.
And I think DeFi and blockchain with the verifiable, transparent ledger, more companies are starting to, stake their currency on DeFi.
Yep.
I mean, there always comes a tipping point where, you could have a tipping point someday where people say, you know what, we don't want dollars anymore.
Yep.
We're out of dollars, we're into Bitcoin. So all this money that, China has and America has, a lot of countries have, and a lot of individuals have, might not be worth. You might wake up one day and that money's not worth what it was before.
Yep.
And I think that's why you see, a lot of countries, like North Korea militarizing. I mean, North Korea, they could make a deal with, the Congo or South Africa and say, I'll tell you what, man, we got nukes, you got lithium, let's make a deal.
Right. Yep. And that's the thing with commodities, right?
Yeah.
Even if these fiat currencies that don't mean anything, that aren't backed by anything, even if they fade away, we're still going to need bananas, and we're still going to need, avocados. And, we're still going to need
there could reach a point where, it's going to be about decentralized finance. It's going to be about cryptocurrency, and people don't want dollars anymore. I think the reason we came up the gold standard was because we had gotten everybody, during World War I and World War II, what did we bomb? We bombed everybody's industries.
Yep.
we didn't care about the population. Japan, we tore down all their industries.
Yep.
Nagasaki and Hiroshima were two of the most productive industrial cities in the world.
Yeah.
What did Germany bomb? They bombed Britain's industry. What did Britain bomb? They bombed Germany's. So at the end of World War II, World War I and World War II, the United States was the only country left that really had a lot of industry still intact. Ford Motor Company didn't get bombed, neither did J&L Steel, So we still had a lot of industry that was intact. So we were the king of the mountain for a while. Now everybody else is built up, and China has sort of surpassed us industrially in terms of the number of companies. And I think China's problem now is they don't have enough people to work because they limited their families to one child, and now they can't get enough workers. to fill all the industrial jobs that they have. But I think, when decentralized finance, as it moves forward, a lot of these currencies that are worth a lot may not be worth so much.
Yeah. Well, I think to bring it all together, when we've talked about monopolies, we talked about imperialism, government monopolies, essentially, right? Governments using war and more tactile imperialism to control commodities for developing nations.
Right.
So when you have these monopolies, you have imperialism, and you have commodities, right? And commodities are always going to be important in some form, even if it's not always the same commodity, right? Coal's obviously gone down in value, but we still need commodities. We still need at least fruits and vegetables and things like that. And so what cryptocurrency offers us is not just decentralization of how we exchange and decentralization of the digital world, but it offers us a way for decentralization of the physical world of, how do we fractionalize ownership over commodities? How do we give reverse ownership and give ownership back to the people who are actually the ones working or who live there, who are not benefiting currently from the commodities around them? And so you have these issues with the centralization where the people who live around a lot of these commodities, who maybe even have very hardworking jobs to produce them for the first world, they're not living nicely. They're not getting paid nicely. And so when you have decentralization of the economy around commodities that will still be valuable, and you can fractionalize ownership so that you don't have these centralized owners that control the entire thing for their own benefit, that's pretty powerful, and that's very powerful, not just for America. That's extremely powerful for the third world that's always provided commodities to the first world, but never benefited properly from it.
Benefited, right. And I think, when you look at, the different economic systems, there's always been like the haves and the have-nots. And I think, we're sort of to a point now where that doesn't really fly like it used to in a lot of countries. And I think, this is one of the reasons. I was talking to my mechanic today. He owns a repair shop with probably about it's probably about 20 bays, 25 bays. So he does good business. He's busy. Well, he can't get people to come to work. He had to cut back, on his hours because the guys are already working 6 days a week, and you got to give him a break. And I said, man, and he asked me, he said, well, what do you think? He said, Mr. Economist, what do you think? Why aren't people coming back to work? I said, you know what? I said, I had, my dad told me one time, he said, I said, man, my job sucks, man. He said, just imagine for a second if your job paid you $600,000 or $700,000 a year.
Would it suck as much?
Said, oh my God, it would be magnificent, So people work based on what they feel the compensation justifies.
Right.
And a lot of people, I think because people were off, for COVID, they've, a lot of people going into business for themselves. A lot of people have found other ways. A lot of people are doing Uber. A lot of people are doing, DoorDash, maybe while going back to school, So I don't think a lot of those people are going to go back to the same jobs at the same rate of pay.
Right.
And then, you have, Walmart says, well, they're making $15 an hour. I said, wow. Ooh.
You still have to stand on your feet.
I said, man, you'll be rich in a year or two, And, they also have, every Walmart has a department that teaches you how to apply for food stamps.
Yep.
And they use part-time workers instead of full-time workers, so you don't have to pay benefits.
Yep.
So I think, and I think people, society is getting to the point where, it's sort of like before the French Revolution, man, where you had the kings and the serfs. You're either royalty or you were nobility or you were a serf, and it's sort of, like you were a landowner or you were nothing, it's sort of like, it's kind of gotten back to that. You know,
Right.
you got
Yeah.
a few people making all the money, and most of the people that are working are not making what they thought they should make, and their pay didn't keep up, with not even with inflation. So I think you have a situation now. They said over 50% of the people in the country are paying 30% of their income for rent.
Hmm.
And they say a lot of them can't afford houses because they have school loans, and it tanked their credit score. And they said prior to that, a lot of those people would have been buying homes, which
Yeah.
spurs a lot of, it's an economic engine, when you have a lot of people buying homes, construction is all, they buy more, and, so on and so forth. But I think eventually, it's getting to the point where the workers can't afford to buy. Like you said, well, there are not a lot of cars. I was talking to my buddy of mine in the car business. I was looking at some new cars, and I said I was going to buy one, but I'm just kind of looking around, And he said, well, you pretty much have to take what's coming in. He said, because there are not a lot of chips, and every car that's coming in is pre-sold. I said, okay. I said, well, I don't, I'm not really hard pressed to get one. I'll just keep driving what I'm driving. I got a newer car, and my wife's got one. And I said, I was just kind of looking around. But see, there's a chip shortage, but also people aren't buying cars.
Yeah.
They can't afford them. And see,
Right.
they put this off for a long time when they put people in leases.
Yep.
I mean, what the hell do you look like making 40 grand a year and buying a car for 40 grand? I mean, come on.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it's ridiculous. And a lot of people, with Uber, a lot of people are moving back downtown, and they don't own cars.
Yep. Yeah. We don't own a car. Yeah.
I know a lot of young people say, if we want a car, if we want to go out of town, we'll just rent a car.
Exactly. That's what we
You
do.
know.
When we went home to Cleveland, there's this app called Toro where you could rent somebody's car from the neighborhood. And
Yeah.
we took somebody else's car, their Honda Pilot, and it had room for our two dogs, and it was beautiful. We didn't have to do anything. I mean, we put gas in it, and I mean, it was great.
Yeah.
You don't have to pay $350 a month to park it here. I mean, these are the costs of insurance and parking.
Mhm.
It's not just the car price, of course, especially when you're living in more urban areas.
Mhm.
You're paying ridiculous amounts of money because there's, like carjackings every day within a half mile of where I live.
Mhm.
So, you're paying a lot in insurance, you're paying a lot in parking, and it just doesn't make sense. I mean, also from the environmental perspective of like,
right.
How often do we really need to have a car that we can't share with somebody else, or, just.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I know a family who, and they're kind of, I guess they would be considered rural. They live on about like 30 acres of land, and they all built houses down there, and they're kind of like, they're not really farmers. They're kind of like hobby farmers. Like, we're going to grow our food, and we're going to do this and do that. And what they do is they bought a fleet of cars and trucks. They got like 3 or 4 pickups, a couple minivans, and an SUV. And when somebody wants to get a car, they just go pick up a vehicle and then go. And I said, well, that makes sense because, there are probably 20 of them there. That, one person, I mean, my car sits in the driveway most of the time in the garage.
Yeah.
It sits. I said, man, maybe I should lease it out or something, or rent it out.
Well, yeah, download Toro. It's an app. You could have somebody else come borrow your car.
Yeah, pay it off. And most of the time, I think a lot of people, most of the time, cars. But my point is that the economy is to the point now where most people cannot afford a car. If you're paying, and people have found alternatives. And, the car business, or the car industry, has really been sort of the industrial driver for the economy for a long time.
Right.
And it's not that anymore. Now it's more data driven. It's like the data economy. It's what it is.
Well, you look at what happened in 2008. I mean, they even in 2008, and after 9/11 too, when they created the Department of Homeland Security, Detroit was actually one of these protected cities that Homeland Security has permanent residence in, around steel mills and car dealer, the car producers, because they believed it to be a critical component. I think they call it like a critical component of American infrastructure.
Oh yeah, it is.
They have Homeland Security on base that protects these industrial centers, including where cars are produced, because they consider it vital to America's success if we ever were to get attacked or something, to be able to have that
they know what we did to other countries. And,
right? Yeah.
and just as an aside, we've been at war somewhere, the United States, 94% of the time since 1776. We've been at war something like 222 out of 240 years. I mean, it's mind-boggling. I mean, don't take my word for it. Look it up.
Right.
We've been at war somewhere. And, I used to always say, well, we don't have a wartime economy, and that military industrial complex is really not true. But I mean, it is. I mean, I mean, let's face it, we've
you
been
look at how
war.
big these companies are that profit off of war.
Oh,
and
yeah,
even you look at our country. I mean, we're still selling arms to random, rebel groups in different countries and stuff like that. And it's not because we care. It's because there's a business. There's some business.
There's a lot of money.
To what does this certain rebel group or this certain government represent? What are they going to do for us? What are the commodities that we're going to get out of that? I mean, that's really why we invest in it. Not only because we have an entire industry ourselves, but because all of our other industries directly depend on our involvement in those countries' conflicts.
Right. So, they drive the economy, I mean, it really does, I think eventually, though, I mean, it's kind of coming to a head, because China is not, this backward country anymore. Their economy is bigger than ours now. We always say, well, ours is still bigger. Well, it's not. They produce more than we do, and their economy is bigger. We have more money because we just have more wealthy people live here. But the people that really have money, the billionaires, they don't really live in the United States or China or the United Kingdom. They sort of live in this country. I don't know what you call it, but they're not really loyal to any one country.
Yeah, they're global. If they have to move somewhere, they will. They
will. And I think the reason a lot of them stay in the United States is because they know that they got some cover on their back. They got a big military, to protect them if something goes down, but I think, eventually, that the reversal is going to have to kind of take place sooner than later, because, one of the things we're going to talk about is, let me see, worker co-ops, but let's talk about the political implications of wealth transfer.
Yeah.
And how DeFi might help reverse this. And maybe we'll have to get to some of this other stuff next week. But a lot of political implications of wealth transfer. I mean, you have more and more people owning more and more stuff.
Yep.
And the people that used to be in the middle, they used to buy things from the people at the top, can't afford to buy them anymore.
Yep.
So, what do you do? A lot of people now are spending 30% of their income on rent, and probably another 25 or 30% on food. And how are they supposed to, help the economy? So it's sort of a self-defeating proposition, and that's why we always talk about the reversal of ownership, because when you start getting some of that back, and we talk about, worker co-ops, decentralized autonomous organizations, when you start to getting some of that back to the workers, you have a much stronger economy for everybody.
Right.
It's like the goose that laid the golden egg. The king says, well, let's just cut the goose open and get all the golden eggs.
Yep.
Well, he killed the goose and there was no more golden eggs. That's sort of like what we're doing. And any country that has a robust economic system where it has robust economic activity has a viable middle class. And when that middle class starts to go away, so does the robust economic activity. So I think, some of the political implications of wealth transfer is that people become more people that have a hard time making it aren't used to that. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So,
well, they can't even fathom, right? I mean, imagine the difference between $200 million and $200 billion, right? What's that difference? Well, I mean, to somebody who's never even had $1 million, that's even the people who have that money, they don't know. They can't fathom the difference between how much they've made. And I think that's the importance of like why taxation is huge, because to the impact to tax a very rich person, say a multi-billionaire, to tax somebody who has billions of dollars, 60 to 70%, doesn't impact their lifestyle at all.
it doesn't.
But to tax all of the billionaires that have that many billions and invest that back into the population, that has a huge impact, right? and so that's a very distinct difference that I think a lot of people have been brainwashed by some sort of concept of like, well, if you tax them, they're not going to create jobs. And they're people that want jobs. And so they for some reason think that if you tax, a multi-billionaire 60%, they're suddenly not going to have money for jobs, as if they're putting that money into jobs right now. And they're not. I mean, the reality is that they'll still have plenty of money to create jobs. They're still going to have ideas and things that, and at some point in the future, in the next 50 years, there aren't going to be jobs. So then we're especially going to have to tax the rich, right?
Right.
So,
and I think, somewhere along the line, you talk about taxes, 5% of the people at the top 5% owe 50% taxes to the government, and they just don't pay.
Yep.
They'll hire lawyers, they'll string it out, and they just don't pay.
Yeah.
And the IRS is meanwhile going after the guy making 50 grand a year, saying you cheated $1,200 on your taxes. We want to audit you.
Yep.
Because he can't afford to get 3 attorneys, and 2 tax accountants, So, a lot of the tax that is owed by the wealthy is not being paid. So I mean that's like 50% of the taxes that are owed to the government aren't being paid by the 5%. So I mean that's one thing that could be addressed. And I think when you hear Warren Buffett talk, he says he doesn't mind paying more money. He says and I heard Bezos say that too. He said, but this is the system that we got. He said, he said we don't mind paying more, and as if to say it's not going to hurt me. No sweat off my brow,
Right.
And which is true because I heard a guy on TV the other day, and he's a young entrepreneur, and he just sold his company for like $6 or $7 million, and so he's doing pretty good. And the guy said, well, how much will you be satisfied? How much money do you want to have? And he said, I just want to be in a position where I can buy anything I want and don't have to worry about the price. I said, well, that sounds like a billionaire. You know what I'm saying? You can buy anything you want, don't have to worry about the price. But I think eventually, because of the wealth transfer, it's creating a lot of instability.
Right.
And if you talk to people on the right and people on the left and say, what's the problem? It says, oh, we're getting screwed by these people. We're getting screwed by the rich people.
They all recognize where the problem is.
The government's screwing us.
Yeah.
Somebody's screwing them. It's just who they want to blame.
They believe different narratives on what to do about it, right?
Yeah.
And inherently, conservative politics have been the politics of the rich, and so it's when you talk about facts, it's the trickle down economics by design openly say we allow the rich to get richer and then hopefully
we do. And
something happens, right? And yet a lot of conservatives will point their finger also, just like the people on the left, and they'll point their finger at the rich and say, why are they screwing us over? And it's like, because your economic model sucks. It doesn't work. But the reality is that even the neoliberals, people who are just think we're going to slap some band-aids on this stuff, that's not going to work. We have to fundamentally rethink the design,
Yeah,
and
we
that's
do.
where things like co-op, actual worker run economies, because leftist utopias of the past have failed miserably. And the reason they failed is because they still had to trust some people to organize the thing, right? They still had to trust a few people in the middle that were going to be like, don't worry, we're going to do the right thing for you.
Yeah, we're from the government. We're here to help you. Yeah.
Right. We're here to help you. Give us your money. We'll figure it out. Right. And all of a sudden you've got some guys in a room staring at $4 billion of tax revenue and they hold the reins and they're like, well, wait a second, that's a lot of money, and you run into major issues. And so the centralization of power has ultimately created authoritarianism over and over and over again, whether it's right or left. And so what decentralization offers us, of course, and the thing that we end up talking a lot about is it really creates that worker run economy, an actual economy where you don't have to trust people. You don't have to trust the people in the middle to just do the right thing for you. You trust the system that you've helped build. You trust the system that you're a node on, that you're a participant of, that you have equal say and governance, and you're fully represented.
Trust.
Right.
You can trust the blockchain ledger to be verifiable and to be transparent. You can trust a smart contract to do the same thing every time, because a smart contract can't cheat.
Right.
You can't trust people, because I think people have shown time and time again that, unless you have something to keep them honest, they're not trustworthy.
Right.
You
never have to go to court. You never have to take a smart contract to court, right? You never have to go to court and be like, well, why didn't you follow the smart contract? Because programmatically speaking, every wealth transfer, every transfer of a unit of wealth with a smart contract follows the rules. It's it's built in. The rules are there. If it doesn't follow the rules, it doesn't get verified by the network. It doesn't work.
Yeah, no apothecated treasury notes and all that kind of crazy stuff, where you get some bonds and you loan them out 8 times and you're getting 8 different interest payments on the same bonds. And the same thing with gold. If everybody with a commodity, with gold as a commodity, called in their gold, there wouldn't be enough gold to pay everybody to go around. So I think the political implications of wealth transfer is that DeFi is really, I think, almost a necessity now. You know what I'm saying? It's something nice to have, but it's almost a necessity. And I think as people find out more about it, and it's amazing how, I watched this show today. I was looking at TV and my wife watched this show called The Talk, and it's these 4 women and they talk about different subjects. And they said, oh God, did you hear what happened today in the British paper in the UK? They say that, this surveillance capitalism, they say that Trump used Cambridge Analytica to depress the Black vote and to find out who would vote and how to manipulate people to vote. I'm like, that's how old is that news?
Right. Yeah, they just stumbled across that now.
Just stumbled across that today. That's what I'm
that's
saying.
The thing. There's entire documentaries about this that have been made.
And said, we said everybody should watch
The Great Hack.
Movie called The Social Dilemma.
Oh, The Social Dilemma. Yeah.
Yeah, which is good. It talks about surveillance capitalism and data analytics and all that. But the thing that amazed me is, like, you guys are just picking up. You have a primetime TV show, and you're just learning this today.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and so and obviously there were a lot of people that watch them that still didn't know about it. That's why they were talking about it on the show. Yeah, so I think the more people find out about decentralized finance and how it works and the implications, I think more people are going to be attracted to it. I think what'll happen is like what happens with everything. The powers to be will say, hey, this is a crazy concept. It sucks. They're going to take your money. It's, like you said, Bitcoin is a scam.
What are they saying now? They're saying, oh, we have to protect people from it. Listen to every Senate. We had a Senate hearing yesterday about it,
Huh.
or 2 days ago. The Senate
Uh-huh.
hearing, the entire discussion was around how do we protect the consumer from cryptocurrency.
But yet
What
and
do you mean?
still they're buying it. All their
Oh yeah,
portfolio.
all of them, all of
All of
them are
them.
owning it. The banks are creating their own. Everybody's moving to decentralized models in the back. But on
Right.
the front,
Right.
they're like, we have to
Mhm.
regulate this because we have to protect the consumer from
Mhm.
decentralization. The consumer doesn't know what they're doing. And it's
Yeah.
like, do you know what you're doing? Because when you go through every fraudulent case with the bank every year and all the fines that banks pay for fraudulent
Mhm.
activity, half the time, some of it's even accidental because the banks don't even know what they're doing. They're just,
They don't.
I mean, who do we have to, who are you protecting here?
Who are you
Right. That's
protecting?
the fair question to politicians. Who are
Mhm.
you actually protecting? Right.
But see, a lot of them don't really understand it.
Right.
And I mean, some of them really, really don't understand it,
Yeah.
because there's a different skill set. There used to be a time when Congress people and senators were pretty smart individuals. They kind of stayed abreast of what's going on. But I think, decentralized finance is something that very few of them really understand. They've heard about it, but I don't know if they understand the implications. And a lot of them don't like it because it's going to change something.
Right.
The way things are going right now works just fine for that.
Right.
So why are we going to change anything? And then,
Yeah.
the investment banks tell them, oh, this is garbage. We better legislate this, and we got to figure out how to get tax revenue on it.
Right.
And
Where's the money in politics, right? Who are their donors? Their
Yeah.
donors are bank, financial industry,
right,
financial
that's right,
sector.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think they as people find out more about it, though, I think they're going to start holding more of them accountable. But you have a lot of these fights now about schools, what gets taught in schools. And it's amazing how, you're trying to teach people less and less.
Yep.
And they wonder, they say, well, why can't we compete against this country? Or why can't we compete against that country? You guys don't want to teach them the truth. You don't want to teach them anything.
Yeah.
And I think the same with decentralized finance. Like I talked to a school principal I know a couple of weeks ago, and I said, why don't you guys start teaching this, man? So you're principal of a big high school, and you're not teaching your kids about cryptocurrency, decentralized finance, blockchain. I say they should be getting this stuff in junior high school or middle school now, I guess they
Right.
call it. Would you agree?
Well, yeah. I mean, but schools have notoriously been very bad at keeping up. I mean, how long did it take for schools to even consider having programming classes and classes about how technology even works? We were all using it in our real lives.
Mm-hmm.
The schools weren't teaching us anything yet. They're like, here's a printer and computer class. You're going to play Oregon Trail. You know what I mean? Like that was our technology class in school was games. You know what I mean? And so now you have some schools, but they're very privileged schools that they teach basic game development. They teach, but how many years did they took? How long was the internet around before schools even caught up to the first internet? So of course, teaching decentralization, teaching basic economic models, the stuff that we talk about around how economies work and how historically economies have worked and their relationship with politics. They don't teach any of that. So
No,
they're
they
missing
don't.
all of the critical pieces to understand why this is going to change their future, but they're at home playing Roblox, which is a decentralized game. You know what I mean? And so there's always this disconnect between what the generation's doing in their lives and what schools can keep up with.
You're right.
So, what to do about that? I don't know. I'm not in education. I'm not
But
in education.
I think a lot of their efforts are passing the proficiency tests.
Right. It's all around testing.
And it's all around testing.
Which is lobbied by the testing companies.
Yeah. That's how teachers get compensated, I guess. And that's how they determine if you're a good teacher or not. It's how many of your students pass the proficiency test. Yeah. So they don't really have a lot of incentive to teach this stuff. But I don't know. I think that would be something good for these kids to start learning. Yeah. So, yeah. Well, we covered a lot of ground today. We didn't get to everything, but please join us next week at the DeFi Collective. Our email is deficollective@gmail.com. And we will be covering, we're going to start out with worker co-ops and
Oh, it's
decentralized autonomous organizations.
yeah.
Worker co-ops, just real quick, are companies that are owned by the workers. And they have them in several countries. I think a lot of it are in Italy. I think there's some in Sweden, Denmark, I believe, and they seem to work great. And we're going to talk about that next week. So don't miss next week. I think we're going to have a great show, and this is something interesting because a lot of things that we're talking about, in the DeFi collective are things that are coming down the pike. You might not see them this year or next year, but this is sort of where the world is headed in terms of economics and finance. So again, our time is up, but we do thank you for yours. And, we'll see you next week. We appreciate you joining us. Alex, do you have any closing thoughts?
No, yeah, we definitely excited to talk about what this actually means for the workers, what the future of work looks like. I think that'll be really cool.
Yeah, we're in a transition period, and, you can bury your head in sand and say, oh, we're going to get back to the good old days and the normal. There's no normal. There's a new normal. Like, what was that show Nene was in, the new normal? Well, there's going to be a newer normal than that. So stay tuned, and we'll see you next week. And thank you for your time. Good night.